This is something not to do.
Okay.
I think I got an email saying that I was in Epstein files.
The way it's sort of headed, do you think there will be a one-person unicorn very soon?
Yes, absolutely. I was more interested in building solutions and products always. A startup has a lot to offer.
Yeah.
And it'll give you as much as you're willing to put in.
Who is an A player?
Who is an A player? I would probably find it hard to be sold to that someone is not an A player right now, that they'll become an A player. If I throw a problem at them, they will figure it out and they'll get it implemented, right? And I can trust them to do that. I am aligned with the idea that if you've made a wrong hire, get rid of them as quickly as possible.
Do you think salary is a valid motivation to walk into work?
I think salary is a perfectly fine motivation as long as the person's motivated and they're mission aligned.
So I have a bunch of resumes here for you. Some of them are good fits, some of them are bad fits.
This is an advice that I would give to all candidates, that if you're applying to a startup, really tailor your resume. Analytical and project management skills at the bottom.
Do you think JDs are bullshit then?
No, I don't think JDs are bullshit, absolutely. So it's really interesting. Until 3 years ago, I barely ever wrote JDs. I would write like general, like we had an engineering JD, but I didn't really like bother updating it or anything. And then we started working with like multiple agencies and like recruitment partners and such. And they would constantly ask for JDs. And then initially it was a bit of like, oh, why do I have to do this? But then I realized that for the person hiring, it gives you a lot of clarity of thought. Like when I actually sat down to write the JD, I had to think about who do I want, right? What kind of a person looks what success looks like in this role.
Yeah.
Right? What is the minimum bar that they should have to be able to be successful in this role? And then any other asks, right? Like you might have some soft asks, like you want this person to go into customer offices, or you want this person to partner cross-functionally. Whatever those are, you will have a very clear picture of what you want from an employee, right? Usually people have some idea in their head.
Yeah.
Like what you want, what an employee's day-to-day will look like, what kind of things that they'll work on. But when you actually sit down and put it on paper, it just gives you a very clear picture of what you want. And I think this is very similar to how you would do engineering, right? Like in engineering, there's a concept of writing a technical spec before you do the work.
Right.
And the reason we do that is for clarity of thought, to say that we have actually in our mind reasoned out and scoped out what you want to build and how you want to build it before you actually get to doing like the code execution part of it. So there's clarity on what you're doing. And I think that's what JD provides as well. On the other end, for someone consuming it, and take it with a grain of salt, because it's not like I've consumed JDs in like years now. I would assume that it gives them a pretty good idea of what it'd be like to, or at least in my mind, a JD should communicate what the company is about, what their role is about, what their day-to-day will look like, and what success would mean for them, right? In the scenario. So I think at least as long as you're able to communicate those core things, the candidate also comes in with a fairly clear picture and some interesting questions as well, based off of either the JD or the information they got. So I don't know if JDs are bullshit. I think there are sections of it that you can be more lenient with. Like, don't ever read a JD and just self-qualify yourself out. If it's a role that you're excited for and you have the hustle, I would say go for it and then just build up the skill set if you need to.
Awesome. Okay, now let's say I see an AI engineer role at Auquan, right? I want to get on your calendar. What's the best way I can do that? You can give me like maybe different approaches that people have taken to sort of end up in your org, and then you can rank them. Like how would you prefer them to be?
Yeah. So there's the obvious channels, right? Like you want to reach out, like there's candidate inbound, you can apply on the portal, you can reach out on LinkedIn, but usually those get so noisy.
Correct.
Very quick that your application can just drown out. Now, I think there's an direct outreach art, if you will, because I've gotten all sorts of direct outreach, which is why I was saying, like, I would say direct outreach, but then you have to be really thoughtful about it.
Tell me the most interesting outreach you've gotten.
This is something not to do.
Okay.
I think I got an email saying that I was in Epstein files.
That's been doing the rounds, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone on Twitter is talking about
that. Right. So I actually got that email. Someone was like, oh, you're in Epstein files, joking, you're not. And I was like, well, thanks, but I'm not talking to you. Right. Like it just leaves like a really weird taste. Like obviously I clicked on the email, they got what they wanted. Clickbait, but you don't want to be clickbaiting potential hiring managers, right? Like, I think you start losing trust right off the bat. But instead, maybe if you reached out to me with something like, hey, there's this new piece of technology. This is what I think about it. What are your thoughts? Right? Like you want to have an honest discourse.
Correct.
That just works much better.
Yeah.
Or you actually are adding value. Like always think of, in my mind, when you send someone outreach, right? There should always be an element of here's how I can add value.
Sure.
And not just like here's my resume and like here's how I can add value to your organization. But even if you want to get that conversation, right? You should talk, like there should be something in there. I can't tell you exactly what, because there's many diverse ways of doing it. But some valuable content that makes me want to engage with you overall. And this is all like pre-resume. I'm not assuming that you've attached your resume or anything of sort. You're literally just messaging me. Then I think that's probably more. And I think the final thing is like, this just applies in general to all outreach. Have a clear ask for the person on the other end. Don't just have general asks. That can you do X? Like it is much better to be like, okay, can you evaluate me for this AI engineer role that I found on your website? Versus, do you have an opening on your engineering team? Right? That just shows me that you haven't even put in the time to research the role, to research the company, what we do, and you're just coming out and just trying. Like it sounds more like mass outreach to me. So,
and asking for a calendar block through an email, right? Is that a good ask for a founder?
So I think you can always make the ask. It's absolutely fine. I think I've had both where people have just reached out and I've responded and then they've asked for a calendar block. And some people who have reached out, be very clear in their ask. Be like, this is what I want. Could I get 15 minutes with you? And this is not just candidates, right? Like this is all sorts of people who want feedback on their products, right? People who want to just chat about a technology and things like that. So all sorts of things happen. Both work, honestly, as long as you're clear about your ask and what you want out of it. I think that's pretty much
interesting
what it is.
So how do you hire at Auquan? And I want to know from you more technically, so, right? Because you're the CTO. I want to understand how technical hiring works in Auquan, and then like we can probably go deeper into that after that.
Yeah. When you say how technical hiring works, I mean, where do I start? Like from the role, like when we define the role to all the way?
Let's just say like today you have the requirement to hire a backend engineer. 2 years of experience. You just had this idea that, hey, I need this guy. Now, what happens after that?
Okay. So you realize that you have a requirement. The first thing that we do now is write a JD. Like I told you. Really put down in paper, who we want, what success looks like for them, what kind of skill set do they need to have. And then once that's out there, we would probably blast it to all our recruiting partners, internally, our recruiter, all of that. And now we're also hiring across geographies, right? So one thing that we have done is made sure that our JDs are uniform. Right. So it's not like a backend engineer in India has different requirement than a backend engineer in London or US. So you just sort of blast it out. And then usually profiles start trickling in. So I used to do a lot of self-sourcing early on. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm relying on like partner channels or agencies or in-house support for that.
Right.
But basically some filtered set of profiles make it to me. I'm still reviewing every profile that goes through our pipe today.
Right.
And essentially that becomes an exercise of, these are what 10, 15, 20 people that I want to look at, go through them one by one. And then that turns into a match talk. A match talk for us is essentially a 15-minute conversation where very quickly you do a round of intros, deep dive into the candidate experience, really trying to get a sense of whether they'd be a good fit in the company. Not like a full culture fit, but just overall from their experience and, like how they work. And then what they've worked on in the past, what motivates them. We also do a little bit of like, what sort of work do you do outside? Like what do you do outside of work sort of things. And then just a little bit of like team fit, like, just a very top level sense check. And if all that passes, then they move on to a pairing round. And now that is probably the most unique round we have. So we used to have a larger interview process before, where we'd have a tech round, which happened with an engineer. Then you'd have another tech round, which happened with an engineer, like a very traditional software interview process. And then there was a final pairing round with me. And then there was a design round as well in between, and then a pairing round with me, and then the final culture round. So 5 interview and 6 if you include match talk. And that obviously made the process really slow for a company our size, right? Availability, everyone's running busy. Candidates sitting in like pipeline for 4 weeks that haven't gone through the entire process. So we changed it. After the match talk now, it can be one of the 2 processes, depending on the candidate and their seniority and such.
Right.
Either we go directly into a pairing round with me, and that's the only round that happens, but it's a 3-hour round. It's almost like doing an on-site, right? If you were on-site, you would do it with me. And the idea is we build something together. And that gives me really good signal on, what it's like to work with you, how quick are you on the uptake, are you able to obviously code?
And they can use AI in this round?
They can use AI, but there are ground rules set for it.
And what are those rules?
The rules are simple enough. So there is 2 parts to this technical interview. The first part is no AI at all, where you're actually showing off your technical skill and going through a repository and understanding the code.
Right.
And really, I get to witness like how quick are you to synthesize code? Do you have the right sort of like smell tests?
Yeah.
Or sense for like where to dive in and whatnot. And then the second part, once they have scoped out the changes that they would want to make and where they would want to make them, the actual code generation part is something that they can outsource to AI.
Let's look at EPD, right?
Yeah.
So there's engineering, there's product, and then there's design. So I think like with however, Anthropic is moving, ChatGPT is moving, right? Like it's clear that engineering is becoming more and more, people are outsourcing their coding to to these tools, right? Now, if you look at it, why is it that, like what makes an engineer good? Like what is the proxy, right? Because I think you mentioned very clearly, right? And like, I'm glad you brought that up about how there is a round or a part of the round which is non-AI, right? What do you look for in that round? Like, what do you look for in that non-AI round that you're doing during a recruitment?
So I have 2 interesting thoughts on that. We can come to the second one later,
Sure.
which is just around like engineering and EPD overall
Yeah.
with AI. But on the round specifically, so you have a repo in front of you. You have the documentation, you have internet at your disposal.
Yeah.
Essentially, how it would work like pre-LLMs
GPT.
era,
Yeah.
right? And what the signal that I'm really looking for is, are you comfortable enough with code, right? So when a repository is put in front of you, are you able to read code, synthesize it, and really understand the repository? Are you familiar enough to understand how to dive into an uncharted territory, if you will, right? This repo that you've never seen before, and quickly figure out what the entry points are, exit points are, right? Like quickly start building a mental model. I think actually, so we recently just hired a senior guy, and he put it the best way that what you're really testing people on is their ability to learn new things quickly, because they definitely haven't seen this repo before. So how quick can you figure it out?
And then how do you gauge that, like in that call?
I think it's fairly simple. Like someone starts reading code and like someone starts synthesizing it. Like it's fairly simple, right? Like someone goes through a block, and then like 5, 10, 15 minutes and you're able to tell if they're getting it or not getting it, or they're just like completely lost, or they're somewhere in the middle. Then you can nudge them along, bring them the right path, because not everyone's gonna like, obviously some people are just lucky and like, well, I won't call it lucky, like they're also skilled, but there's a factor of luck in interviews, I feel. So you can just blaze through it and directly get all the right answers, or you're essentially doing the right things but not quite at the right answer part. So then you can nudge people along, but overall, you get to see very early, like 10, 15 minutes in, if someone's able to just synthesize things in front of them, right? Like, are they able to understand it? Are they able to follow it along? All of that becomes fairly clear, because this is an interactive, like, pairing round, right? They're not just going through it in their own time.
Yeah.
We're doing it together. I think there is no one specific marker for it, right? I'm just trying to think if I can pull up, like, some specific examples for you.
You could probably walk your way back from the folks that you hired, right? Like what is something you see in all of them?
Yeah.
Maybe something that's, because the more I think about it, right? Like I think the skill here is pattern recognition. You look at a repo, you look at a mono repo that's like huge, right? And like okay, like I can take my time and like get this. It's not that big a deal. So that's what I want to understand, right? Like what is this skill that all your engineers have, or like folks that you love to work with have, right? So if you could tell me a bit on that.
Yeah. So I will say this definitely. It's not like everyone that we have on the team solved the problem out and out, right? That is not the requirement of the round either. in my mind. The requirement of the round is for you to really give me a signal on that you can learn things quickly, right? Like if we bring you on and if we send you into uncharted territory, you'll be able to figure things out and you can do it yourself in an autonomous manner without needing hand-holding. And then that is on the juniorish level, right? Like junior to mid-level.
Yeah.
That's most of the signal that I'm looking at. Then once you start getting into like mid-level to senior level, right? Like a bit more comes into play. Like, okay, when you are defining your paradigms or when you're defining your APIs and when you're, essentially changing signatures, how do you think about them? What is your reasoning behind them? Like, right? Like I like to get a lot more deeper into that because my assumption is that the business logic part of it can be figured out. But it's more important to have the fundamentals of design right overall, right? Like software design right. And we have a separate design round for these folks as well. But just overall, when you're working even in something like this and you want to get it done quickly, what are the sort of first principles that you go with? And then I also really like to talk to people about how they would ensure that this works in production, right? So obviously testing is one part of it, but what are you going to monitor post-deployment, right? Great, you've done everything, but things are going to happen, things are going to break. So what are you going to monitor post-deployment? How are you going to ensure that this scales, right? Like, have you thought of sort of this 0 scenario to like the 10 scenario to the 100 and to the 1,000, right? Like, have you sort of thought of that journey? Are there places that you assume this will break? What is it that you want to revisit here? So all of those things, right? Like, so when it starts getting to like senior level, I'm looking for that signal a lot more, that overall, do you have your fundamentals correct, right? Rather than just breeze through the problem, because that I believe you'll do anyways. And obviously they do have to show me that skill as well. It's not like, oh, I didn't write a single line of code or like anything and I still made it through the interview. No, there's more like I got through most of it. Couldn't get the finishing touches in, or like, had a bug here or a bug there left. But overall, that was because we maybe got into like a different discussion and I like what they had to say. More or
Interesting.
less.
So I think let's leave out mid and senior positions, right? Like I'm looking more at entry level junior positions. Do you think engineering roles at a lesser experience are going to keep reducing over time? And like you've been doing this for 8 years, right? Like you're a CTO of a company and you've seen this trend sort of transform over time. So what do you think about it?
I think there are two firm camps. Entry level software roles. Okay, let me take a step back. Entry level software roles, the way they've existed, are definitely going to go away. Right? It's not going to be a world of you come in and you work on this small refactor for weeks, or you work on this feature for weeks, and sort of your first year is mostly onboarding. And in a startup, that's not true, but like at least in a big company, like first year, it's kind of like just you're onboarding 6 to 9 months, and you're working at a very slow pace. So I think that kind of environment is just absolutely gone, right? With all the coding tools that you have now, with everything that you can do now, you should just be getting stuff pushed. And I think that's where startups will prefer to hire for experience. I'm not proud of it, but right now at Auquan, for example, we are not hiring anyone below 4 years of experience. And the reason for that is not because I inherently believe that people below that experience can't do a job well. It's because I don't believe we have enough bandwidth to coach these folks to get to the next level. Right?
AI can already do that.
Sorry? No, it's not AI should already do that. It's more that even if a junior engineer comes to you, right, they can produce outcomes for you and they can probably produce it very quick, but you don't know if under the hood that like whatever they're producing is based on like solid fundamentals thinking, right? And that is why you have all these processes and such in place, like code reviews and whatnot. But over time, you want to coach these younger people, right, to become mid-level engineers. And like if the strategy is that just keep throwing work at them and they're gonna eventually get there. From a technical perspective, they will. But from just a cross-functional perspective and like how to collaborate and how to like do things and how to maybe drive a project end to end and all of those things, they are required skills. And you have to coach people. You can't just leave them out in the wild. And given the way we are working and the speed with which we are working and where we want people's time invested, coaching was one of the things that we deliberately decided is not going to be on the docket. Right? So today, we are not hiring 4+ people. Once we have a bigger team and we have more people, right, we will want to hire junior people. We have brought interns. We had a interns pretty much like last 3-4 summers. We've had summer interns and all of that. But it's really just the coaching factor, because it would be a disservice to hire someone who's early in their career and then give them a place where for 2-3 years they don't get any coaching. So I think it would just be dishonest on my part.
I think the other thing I want to know is, you go to an IIT, right? Like you go to a college, and the first thing that you start grinding on is competitive programming, lead code, DSA, right? Like these are all, or at least were proxies for like a good engineer a couple of years back, right? Like, do you think that's still the case? Like, do you still use that as a proxy for the folks you hire?
The tech round that I was talking about was more like a DSA sort of a round that we used to have at Auquan. And pretty much all the interviews that I've done in my life, I've had like multiple rounds of DSA, algo, whatever. I personally thought it was easy to cheat on them, right? There was this book, I forgot what it was called. I think it was Cracking the Coding Interview or something in my time. I don't know what it's called now. And I don't think you even had to do competitive programming or anything. I never did, personally. I was more interested in building solutions and products always. But you could get this book and you could go through every problem. And if you really understood the solution, you're pretty much covered for all interviews because it covered all the concepts. Eventually, it almost seemed like it would come down to some form of a graph algorithm or a dynamic programming problem. So just sort out those concepts and you're probably good to go. Know your general algorithms. So I personally felt like it was easy for me to cheat on these interviews, and cheat in the sense, not like I knew the question before, but I saw the problem. I could very easily pattern match that, look, there's a dynamic programming problem, just apply that, right? And I know this happened because, okay, maybe I shouldn't take like specific names, but there was an interview that I passed. And I personally thought I did horribly. But the guy was just amazed that I was able to apply dynamic program to it. And I was like, that's just pattern match, man. Like, I don't know why I'm being awarded for it, but...
Like, I want to sort of, to the audience, to anyone who is in, say, first year now, right? Shub, who had entered IIT Roorkee all those years back, right? He wants to make a career in engineering. He knows that this is what I want to do. This is my jam. Like, what do you think he should focus his time on learning? An 18-year-old in a engineering college anywhere in India, what should they learn so that they can become a good engineer by the time they graduate?
Trust your curriculum to teach you the fundamentals, in my mind, right? I think most curriculums go through a lot of scrutiny, planning, all of that. So I would just trust the curriculum to teach me the fundamentals, but really just build things. There's no excuse not to anymore. I think there's like one of those things. We were talking earlier about what gets a conversation, right? And if we specifically talk about junior folks, seeing that they've just gone off and done things on their own is a very big signal for me. So there's something that I personally did, and I told you that it helped me, take my career off.
Correct.
I think now there's just no excuse not to do it. Like, you have all these coding tools. A bunch of them also have free subscriptions. So even money is not a factor.
Yeah.
Right. So just get to building things, really. I think the traditional form of this used to be contribute to open source, right? Because it was cumbersome earlier to have to write an entire product from scratch, right? Even if you're doing that, you're probably forking something and then building off a base. But now you can actually just generate the entire scaffolding and then build things on top. And the reason to do that, in my mind, is obviously hone your tech skills, get experience of like taking something end to end under your belt. Yeah, you will have learned, even in like the smallest sense, how to scale or how to think about scale, auth, security, right? Like these things. But then on top of all of this is when you start doing that, you start building implicit product thinking. And as you're talking, like, I think these two, like product management and engineering, are going to converge. So engineers who have that product thought in them are going to be massively wanted, versus engineers who are just like, give me a ticket, I'll implement, are going to be replaced.
Interesting.
Possibly.
So
when you write a spec, just also implement, because the cost of implementation is so cheap now. Before you wanted your specs to be approved because cost of implementation was high.
Right.
So, you're losing like 1, 2, 5, 10 engineering days because someone implemented something wrong. So you wanted to be absolutely sure that you're implementing the right thing. I think now the cost of implementation has gone down so much that you can write a sensible spec. And while you're iterating on the spec, there's nothing stopping you from actually just implementing it as well. And then if you make changes to the spec, you can always go make changes to the underlying flows and such as well, right? So really, like, people who can just take things end to end are going to be much faster in velocity, will have many more outcomes to show, versus people who want to exist in that traditional framework. And not to say that the traditional framework is just entirely, nonsensical or not useful. Obviously, it's worked, and like I've worked in that framework for many years before this. It works, right? It's a fabulous framework. It works well. But I think for the AI era, it needs to be reimagined. And that goes back to the bit that I was saying, like, how do you get to a point where you just have an assembly line and it's just churning out code?
So a couple of things that I also wanted to cover, right? Like, I think one thing that is unique to you is that global hiring is a priority to you, right? Like, it is a problem that you deal with on a daily basis. I want to understand, like, how does hiring look differently in the countries you hire in?
So our process more or less remains the same. There's not much change to the process, but I think very different motivations for people overall.
Yeah, just want to get to that.
Yeah. So I think India, by and large, is, I would say, sort of like a more fast, mass-moving market, right? In terms of like engineering talent. And then here, it's usually all about base salary. People are just looking at base all the time. UK is somewhere in the middle. Depends on like the kind of people that you're talking to. They're motivated by equity. And then US is way more motivated by equity. And I think that's also like a reflection of what sort of outcomes have people seen in the past, right? Because in India, we've had a few good exits, but like by and large, it's not been like, every year there's like 10, 15, 20 companies smashing IPOs and you're hearing all these stories of how employees like, had these massive returns and then they went to another company and then they had a massive return there as well, all of those things. So I think that ecosystem is still being built up. And this will only be like things that change over decades, right? Not instantly. So I think that is, in my mind, the biggest factor. And then the second thing is, it's really interesting. I have really never had a question about work-life balance outside India. People ask about working hours and such, right? But candidates in India are really concerned about work-life balance. I don't know why.
They want like 5 days a week.
5 days a week.
What do they want?
We do 5 days a week. That's fine. No, people just ask me this question, right? Like I'm telling you, like verbatim. A candidate will be on a call and be like, okay, so what's the work-life balance like? And I was like, well, what do you want out of this role? Like, where do you want your career to go, right? Like a startup has a lot to offer. And it'll give you as much as you're willing to put in. A lot of people take it as, oh, you just want to work long hours or whatever. It's like, no, if you're doing your job, right? Like whatever we agreed to or like, we said you needed to do. If you've done that job, no one wants you here. Go home, right? It's not like we want you here then. But it's more about being able to deliver outcomes. And I think the reason why people outside don't really ask this question is because that is the first principle. Everyone understands that, I am going to agree or like, I'm going to make some commitments to my team, to the company. And as long as I deliver on those commitments, I'm good. I think somehow in India, maybe it's just not translated well. But people usually take that as a sign of sort of like a green flag to say like, okay, this is our way to make you work longer. Right? Like whenever I tell people like, okay, so, you'll have some commitments as long as you're delivering them. It doesn't really matter. Right. And then obviously you're showing up to meetings and all the org ceremonies and things like that. And then that almost instantly rolls into, okay, so what is the work-life balance like? And I think maybe it's a factor of that, but I don't know.
Let's move a step further, right? Like employee comes into your company and you have employees across the globe, right? Now let's talk about appraisals, right? How do people ask for appraisals across countries? Like, do you see something that is very starkly different across these countries? Like what happens?
That is interesting. I don't think it's starkly different except like, so I think appraisals are a separate story because really depends on like where people are in their career, what they value, right? Like, again, I think India is just a cash heavy economy or whatever you want to call it. But people always prefer just higher base all
Cash,
the time, right? Like cash, essentially. Outside, it's different, right? Like you talk to people and offered cash, they'll be like, can I get
More
some
equity.
equity? So I think that is one of the major differences, specifically for appraisals. I think apart from that, I think on appraisal side, it doesn't change a whole lot. I think, of course, like the market expectations in terms of like whatever is average here, whatever is average in different geographies, that's always going to exist. Inflation and all of that accounted for. But then I think just generally, at least the way we have run the process, we rate people on the same things. We run the same process. People from India are doing peer reviews for people outside. People outside are doing peer reviews for people in India. So Auquan also doesn't operate on like, there's one headquarter and then there are two other offices. It's like all three offices are equal to us. It is one team spread across three offices, and we're all just working together. So really, we have tried to maintain a unified culture. So I don't think, at least at Auquan, there's a whole lot of difference. And again, this was a deliberate choice. Like when me and Chandni came back to India, so we're both outside, right? We're both in the US. She came back first. I followed soon after. And we were very fortunate to have some really good managers through the professional career.
Yeah.
And we wanted to replicate that in terms of just saying that, we want our employees to have the best environment possible to do their best work, and we'll take care of the rest, right? So very valley-like culture in that sense within Auquan, right? The way people work, the way people operate. Even some of the things that I've talked about here, right? Like around work-life balance and things like that. I think it's all just very valley-ish in my mind. And I think that just comes from the fact that we both came from there and we try to establish a culture like that. So if anything, maybe Indian people are getting treated more valley style. Than
on salaries, right? Like, do you think salaries should be public in an org? Like, what problems might that generate?
I think there's two things. So first of all, salaries can be public, cannot be public. I really, like personally, I think it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Like that is my take. And the reason that is my take is because our hiring philosophy has always been that we have bands for levels, right? Like you can be within the salary band for this level. And then we evaluate you for a level, right? And it doesn't really matter to me. So every match talk that I have, I ask the candidate, what is your expected CTC, right? And the candidate usually starts off telling me, so my current is XYZ. And I stop them right then and there. And I'm like, I am not asking you for XYZ right now. I don't care what you're making right now. Tell me what your expected is. And then once you tell me your expected, I can match you to a band and we'll evaluate you for that band. And if you do well in that band.
How do you evaluate?
So when I was telling you about the problems, right? Like if it's a junior candidate, right? Like there's only certain requirements. If it's a mid-senior candidate, we add more requirements on like what they should display.
So it's very objective. Like there's rarely a workaround around like this evaluation, right? Or is it like very objective that, hey, this person fits this band, so this is the salary we give him? Is it always like that?
So I will talk about some examples there. But yeah, so the general philosophy is evaluate someone for a role, right? And then pay them the salary for that band. It really doesn't matter what they were making previously. They could have been making higher, they could have been making lower. I don't care, right? So in India, generally people follow the 30% rule, right? Not necessarily looking to follow that. It's like we have our bands, we'll acquire people on those bands.
You're a founder, right? Like you've hired people, maybe even fired a few for 8 years, right? Like, do you think salary is a valid motivation to walk into work?
It can be. Absolutely. Look, like people have really different life situations, right? I cannot sit here and be like, oh, you should absolutely always just be motivated by my mission. You should be. If you're going to a startup, you absolutely should be. If you're not, like, don't go to a startup because it's going to be hell. If you don't enjoy what you do day in, day out, it's going to demand a lot out of you. But I think salary is a perfectly fine motivation as long as the person's motivated and they're mission aligned. They don't have to be like the biggest, like passionate, drum beater of your mission. But as long as they're mission aligned and they get the job done, that's absolutely fine. I would still say that a person like that probably makes for a better like late series AB sort of a fit, not a seed fit. But yeah, it's absolutely fine as a motivator in my mind.
Now on hiring and firing, right? Like there's this very famous quote that Ashneer Rover says, right? That I hire fast and I fire fast because I like to keep the team lean and get rid of people that don't fit in, right? Like, what do you have to say about that? Like, do you think you're aligned with it or not?
Okay, so I am aligned with the idea that if you've made a wrong hire, get rid of them as quickly as possible because they're just going to be net negative for your team.
And what is the wrong hire? Like, how do you check that?
Could be many different things, right? Like you eventually find that they just are hard to collaborate with, right? They're not get along with the team.
Yeah.
They're struggling to follow org ceremonies, right? The quality of work that they're producing is just not up to the mark. Maybe they're not as engaged as they were. Could be many different reasons why someone ends up being a bad hire, right? But if you have a bad hire, cut them out as quickly as possible. And, it might seem like it's a very harsh decision or, like one that doesn't really take the person into consideration. But in my mind, you're also doing a favor to the person because they're probably in a bad situation and they can get their career back on track much sooner than sticking with you for 3 months, wasting time, not getting anywhere, right? Overall being in a negative environment.
Yeah.
And then starting on the search, which then delays their overall next career thing. So I think it's just like a win-win for both parties in that situation. Your team stays protected; they're not affected by their negative energy or whatever is going on.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you this for sure: if you have a bad hire and if you have A players on your team, they're gonna start getting frustrated very quickly, right? They're not gonna take shoddy work. They're not gonna take incomplete work. They're gonna want like certain things that the team follows to be done, right? So yeah, they're gonna start getting frustrated really quickly, and that's what you don't want.
Who is an A player?
Who is an A player? That's a very general question. We're really role specific in my mind.
Let's take senior backend engineer at Auquan. Describe an A player.
Senior product engineer. We don't really have backend engineers anymore. So it's full stack product engineers. A player in my mind today is talking to customers directly, understanding their problems, has relationships with them, and is able to synthesize the problem, all of this autonomously, right? Develop a solution, show it to the customer, collect feedback, iterate on it, essentially drive the whole process end to end in my mind, and do this cross-functionally. So if they need to bring in DevOps resources, if they need to bring in product resources, then they should have the good sense to know when they need to bring in product resources, right? This is not a call out to say like, just do everything. There's more to say that you're driving the process, right? Like you're not in the passenger seat anymore. You're in the driver's seat. You're driving the entire process and you're bringing people along for the ride when you need them. So a person like that, in my mind, ends up being an A player.
How do you find people like that? Or do you make them in the org? Like, what have you seen more, right? Like, see, there's either like this guy walks into office, day one, he's an A player, right? Like, you just know him. And then there's people that build themselves into A players, right? Like, how do you compare the two?
I would probably find it hard to be sold to that someone is not an A player right now, that they'll become an A player. You had enough time in your career, right? At least in some aspects, you need to be an A player already. It is absolutely possible that, you have worked as an engineer in a traditional org, and now you're coming to a startup and there's just like a ecosystem, or we say, okay, were there any sparks of brilliance, right? Like did at any point in the interview, anyone who was on the panel feel like, man, this guy is just, brilliant, right? Like he's done something that is just out there. I don't know how to like explain it without telling you the entire context, but like I
you
think
can give an example. You can give an example. Like what is the spark?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like without telling you the interview context, like I'm trying to anonymize that a bit. But like I mean, a spark of brilliance can come anywhere, right? Like it could be in a really elegant database query you wrote as part of the solution. It could be in the way you just approach the problem, right? Like, but there is this spark of brilliance that you can just notice in people, right? Like you've probably talked to people, and the way they have solved the problem suddenly makes you go like, aha, right? Like great, that's just a very elegant solution. So you see some sparks of brilliance come through. This doesn't have, what I'm not saying is that your entire interview has to go that way, right? But there could be moments in the interview where the interviewer is just sitting there going like, oh, wow, this person did well. So those are sparks of brilliance. And you should just have those in the interview, right? And then overall, what I'm really trying to say is that for me as a senior, if you haven't ever been a player in any of the domains that you've been a part of, any of the teams that you've been a part of, then I find it really hard to believe that you're going to become an A player now. Enough of your career has gone by. You've had enough chances. And if you've not done it till now, obviously better late than never. But again, I'm not taking that punt. Personally.
Very interesting. That's a solid take. I think very valid. I also want to ask you, right, like on job switching, say you have a bad hire, right? Like, or actually let's just take any hire. Do you think people should switch their jobs often? What do you think about that?
I think they should talk to someone who did that 2 years into their Flipkart job, right? And they had 2 years of unvested stocks.
Yeah.
So I think it's really like a risk reward ratio, right? And I think that's where India is lagging. The risk appetite is just really low. And I think that's just a general ecosystem problem. And again, that'll evolve over time. You have to have some risk-taking mindset. But then obviously, if you're at a place and you feel like, my career is not growing here, maybe you don't believe in the company as much anymore, then I would say don't even maybe wait 2 years, get out quicker, right? Why spend another year of your life there? Early career, no one's really going to penalize you much for jumping in a year. But if you do that repeatedly, then it becomes a problem. So my take more is don't just go for the highest salary, right? Necessarily. Look at the offer holistically. And what I would personally always optimize for is how interested I am in the proposal of what they're solving, right? Like, what is the problem statement? What am I going to get to work on?
Right.
What kind of experience am I going to get under my belt? And I think that essentially compounds a lot more than your base over time. So I would always, early on in my career, optimize for experience. And then depending on what you want to do, eventually you can like pick your focus areas, or you can go like more diverse. But yeah, optimize for experience over anything else.
Do you think people should try out things before they sort of finalize what they want to do?
You can. Again, the cost of experimentation and tryouts so low now that you can just go out and try, build things, see if you're interested in something.
Yeah.
But I also think like research, see what jobs are open, right? And eventually you'll come across a problem statement that just speaks to you. And that's absolutely okay. And then once something speaks to you, still try it out, right? Like still experiment and read and see what kind of things are happening in there. What stage of the company are you joining, right? Let's say you are just really into payrolls, right? And you're like, okay, I want to build the best payroll solution ever. And in India, you have Rippling, right? And you go and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go join Rippling, but you haven't done the research that Rippling probably has a really well built out payroll suite already that you're now going to be managing. And by the way, any Rippling folks don't hate me. I'm just taking an example. But the idea here is that you want to make sure that you get meaningful experience, right? Like if you're going to be a number in the system, if you're just going to be working on a feature here and there, that's not going to contribute a whole lot to your development. What will contribute a whole lot is when you essentially potentially even given a lot more than you can handle, and you somehow find your way through it. Which startups excel at early stage, right? So yeah, and you have to be the kind of person who really likes that challenge. There's no right or wrong here, by the way, right? Like we're just specifically talking about early stage, seed stage, right? Seed stage, Series A. Those kind of startups that just have a lot of demands, and if you enjoy that kind of a role where you're going to be challenged constantly, you're going to constantly feel like, oh, how am I going to solve this? And like, you enjoy that thrill, and then you get the dopamine hit when you actually get it working, then you're going to do fabulously. But if you're someone who likes more structure and, like wants to sort of progress through the project and all the ceremonies and everything together with it, yeah, I think you're probably better suited for something of a bigger company.
We're approaching the close. So I have like one last question for you. So you say that you write a JD, right? Like before every role goes out there, and then you sit for an interview with this person, right? Do you sort of look for spikes that are in the JD, whether they exist in this person, or like what is your evaluation procedure? Like you're talking to someone, right? Like right off their intro, you know their vibe. Like is there a vibe check or not? And like then after that you get into the technical details, right? So I just want to understand like what really goes on in your mind while an interview is happening.
It's super objective. So when we did the whole JD exercise, we also did the exercise of building a scorecard. And that scorecard for every round has a series of questions that the interviewer has to answer
Hmm.
about the candidate. And then it just becomes an objective exercise when you're debriefing on them. So it is not about I felt the vibes today, so this person's gonna get hired.
Yeah.
It's about I felt the vibes today, we're gonna interview this person, and these are all the questions that I can answer about them in as objective or as objectively as possible, pretty much. And then you tally notes.
But for a startup, I'm not ready to agree that there would have been times when you bypass the objective part and you're like,
okay, sure.
I need this guy. Like, I
Yes,
need this guy.
absolutely.
So like what were those candidates like? Like that really make you question your own processes, that really make you go like, this guy gets it and I want to hire him.
Early on, we had JDs. I think I told you we were
Right,
doing like all
right.
of this before. And it kind of worked because we still did a debrief, so people still had to bring their notes. So that was always a requirement, right? Like, you have to have notes on the candidate, and we're gonna have a debrief on the candidate, and then we're gonna decide on an offer. So it's not like me decision, right? This has happened where I was pushing for a candidate once, and the team on the other end was just like, our interviews were shit, and I was like, well, I can't do much here, right? I can't just override the team. But I think overall, when I've pushed for candidates, they have really given, at least like in my round, what they've really shown me is if I throw a problem at them, they will figure it out and they'll get it implemented, right? And I can trust them to do that.
Is it things they say, or is it
No,
like
it is the action, right?
it's just natural. You know it.
No, it is what they did in the interview. So it's not about what they say. What they say is obviously important, right? Because that gives me a glimpse into their reasoning, their thinking, and all of that. But also, it's really about the outcome that they were able to achieve in the interview, right? So Auquan overall is a very outcomes-driven company. Believe it or not, recently, like my co-founder, who's also our CEO, one of the messages that she sent was, can we stop reporting on what we are doing, and instead can we start reporting on what has been done or like what's already been achieved, right? So I think a lot of people fall into this trap of I'm doing X. But if you suddenly change that narrative to saying, I have achieved ABC, and XYZ is left, right? Suddenly it, like the conversation just changes overall. Then people know that, okay, I don't even need to worry about ABC. Let's talk about whatever XYZ is, and so on. So overall, like we're a very outcomes-driven company. So it's really about the outcomes that they've been able to achieve in the interview, not what they're saying or like, vibe check and all of that. Beyond that, you have to show me something tangible. If you don't get to something tangible, you're probably not going to get there. I think I did mention this earlier on that some people didn't finish the interview. And when I talk about they didn't finish the interview, that doesn't mean that there was no outcome in the interview. Yes, they might not have been able to finish the problem, run a test suite and all of those things. But what did happen was they got through the problem. They got through the core business logic. They're able to get through things like database queries and such, right? So they had tangible outcomes. They just weren't able to stitch it all together because maybe we spent time on something else, discussing it. So those are the scenarios.
But they do end up proceeding to the next rounds.
Yes, they do end up proceeding to the next round. So this is where I would say there are like sparks of brilliance because that is where we spend time, right? Like a candidate, not in the scope of the problem, but brought something up and they're like, oh, we can probably do this. And it's like, okay, let's explore it, right? Let's chat about it. There's an interesting thread that no one else has brought up yet. Why don't we explore it? It's more of a open interview in that sense, right? Where you're looking for many, many, many different signals. And as long as a conversation about a certain thing is going to give me that signal, it's fine to have it. It doesn't have to be the full set thing that, you have to go from point A to point B to point C.
But it needs to exist somewhere.
It needs to exist somewhere. Yeah.
Awesome. Shub, so we are down to our last part of the podcast. Something very interesting. So we did a bit of digging and like we found that you're hiring for an AI engineer at Auquan, right? So we texted some users of Tal and we asked Tal who would be a good fit, who would be a bad fit. So I have a bunch of resumes here for you. Some of them are good fits, some of them are bad fits. I want you to give your most honest thoughts on the resume and then finally hit me with, would you interview this person or not? We can have red flags, green flags. What are your hiring biases? What fits, what doesn't fit? And then you can give me a verdict, right?
So just off the bat, one of the first things that I just read the summary, talk a lot about impact, right? Not just that I did XYZ, but actually the impact that it had. Red flag, analytical and project management skills at the bottom.
So I want to understand, like you're reading every bullet point like thoroughly, like that's what you do with every resume?
I read through.
Okay.
Because I just want to get a sense of what this person has been up to in that role. And the other reason to do that is sometimes you find like hidden gems, right? Like people will not realize. And actually, this is an advice that I would give to all candidates, that if you're applying to a startup, really tailor your resume. If you're serious about the role, if you're mass applying, sure. I think that is probably where experience looks good. But for Auquan, I think we just kind of don't hire from agencies, and nothing against agencies, but we just don't hire from them. So I think that is probably where this would be a fail. So we would not be proceeding with an interview here, and that's probably just because the person's coming from an agency. And that's just a hiring bias that we have at Auquan. Although 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth bullet in Kahoot, right? I actually quite like it. And the reason I like it is due to that little thing at the end.
Lower bundle
due
size.
to a lower bundle size. Because it tells me exactly what they did, right? And I can explore it with them, versus it just being like, okay, load time was 80% less. I have no idea. Did you change your band? Like, did you change your framework? Was there something like just inherently broken with things? Like, what was it? But the guy is calling it out very clearly. Great. Tells me very quickly, like, what your journey was, right? And then you start talking about the impact you created. I mean, just reading that, I'm probably going to talk to this person.
Yeah.
But, and whatever I've read so far, because again, just very, very specific to the industry that we're in, right? Like, we're building financial workflows. One of them is AI equity research, and this person's done this before. So just very hyper relevant, right? And if someone's able to talk about the work that we are doing with this much detail, that just gives me a really good idea that they understand the industry and they've done it before, probably have a lot of good experience to bring with them. So that becomes an instant have a chat for me, right? Like, it's hard enough to find good AI engineers, and then you have the chance of finding an AI engineer who also has the industry experience. That automatically becomes a yes for me. Really good pedigree overall as well. Really good impact that they've created in the past. You know, they've included their side project, which was 2025. They were obviously
Working
employed,
somewhere.
right, through and through. They still have the side project. Just shows a lot of passion, curiosity. I think I'd love to have a chat with this person.
So I think it's very interesting that you didn't even get to the part where they've written their college, right? Like, I think you just scanned through their work and you already knew that, okay, fine, like, this guy I'm going to hire.
So the college was up top.
Let's say this guy had studied at some, like a no-name college, right? Would your verdict be any different?
For this specific person, no.
No.
I think I would have still taken a call, unless, like, I mean, I think so here, if you look at the journey, right? VMware, that's a T1 in my mind. The way this would work for me now is that when I have a chat with them, I would explore some of these threads, right? And I'd be like, talk to me more about this and tell me what you did specifically, because a resume is just a way for you to get a conversation. I see no impact, right? You've just said, like, these are things that I did. Let's see what happened at Amazon. See, again, like, design label generated templates, improving package routing and logistics efficiency. Great. By how much? Right? Like, where was it? Like, give me some idea, like, what kind of impact you created. Did it improve by like 0.1% or did it improve by 10%? I have no idea. So I think ShipRocket is when they really start talking about some impact. Also, just really short stints. What's going on with that? I'm just looking at the timeline. And if you're doing such good things, where would you jump? And then you have a career break, 2020 to 2021. They haven't really called out why. We could explore that on a call. That's fine. Not a hard issue.
So career breaks are okay.
Career breaks are fine. My usual question to people when they talk about a career break is, what did you do? Why did you take it? And, you know, people can have all sorts of reasons. There's like family issues. There's like something going on. They have to support people. But the biggest red flag to me is when a person says, I took a career break. What were you doing? Nothing, right? Like, when I say nothing, it's like, you know, I was traveling, this, that, blah, blah, chilling, right? Finally, there's Microsoft.
This was a long stint, 3 years.
Yeah, this is long. They finally got settled in, looks like. And I also have a feeling that they probably got that feedback that looked like your previous experience You've essentially jumped 4 companies. You've jumped 4 companies in a span of 2 years, right? Which is not great. So overall, I think when I started from the bottom, I was just like, no. I think I still probably would not talk to them. And the bigger reason being the work that they're doing at Microsoft is just not something that is relevant to us right now. So I have some idea in what context. What does happen, what we're not doing here is, in this scenario, I would have probably looked up Shiprocket.
Yeah.
Right? I would have looked up Surefy.
Yeah.
So I usually like look up companies to say like, what do these companies actually do? And like,
Yeah.
is there anything meaningful there? But the person looks good though.
Okay.
Trying to figure out what their, okay. Let's take a look at their. When I read their resume, I think we had a really similar person working at Auquan for a while. I don't know if I can like relate their education or something. But we had a person similar to this working with us for a while. The person looks good. My biggest ask of them would be, do you want to do research or do you want to build solutions? Right? Like their entire resume, they talk a lot about research side of things, more than they talk about
building something,
impact side of things, if you will. And essentially where we are sitting now, it's more intersection of like push the limits of application of AI and what is available. The research part for us comes later once we have collected enough internal data and we want to like start training our own models. But until then, I'd probably be a pass on this one.
Pass.
And maybe for them there is, because I think Stamp My Visa might be their bigger experience that they want to call out. I see Walmart Labs is like, they've mentioned it, but it is very wordy. I will say this as well.
Yeah.
You don't want someone to read this much as well. So I think some 4 or 5 bullets down, on Stamp My Visa, they've called out conceptualize and develop wallet miles, right? And they talk about what that does. And that's really good to see, because they're not just saying that they developed it, they're saying they actually conceptualized it, right? So I would explore this in a chat with them, to be like, talk to me about this project. Tell me, how did this idea come to you? How did you get a sense for it? How did you drive stakeholder buy-ins and all of those things, right? There's also a couple more things that stand out here to me. They've done hiring, right? And looks like they have no management responsibilities yet. But there is one thing missing here for me. They were a software engineer at Walmart Labs. They're a senior software engineer / early founding engineer at Stamp My Visa. Call out to me, where did you make the career jump and what caused it, right? Like if you grew within this company, if like it'd be a pretty powerful story if from December 2023 to April 2026, which is what, like 2.5 years, give or take some months, you're able to go from a mid-level engineer to a senior engineer and do all of these things. That is frankly impressive, right? And I think that is what really makes me want to talk to this person, because they seem like they're one of those diamonds in the rough sort of a candidate, who's seen career growth within a company. Here I'm assuming that they've made that career ladder within the company, and really like delivered on all of this. So I'd like to have a chat and see how it goes.
Awesome. That brings us to the end of the podcast, I think.
Okay, great.
I don't have anything else.
Sweet.
We can stop rolling.